Birdee against Kwok Pui-Yin. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Excuse me if I didn't. But it's going to be a really intense match. I can see the team sheets already here, and we're going to show them in a moment. But I can assure you it's going to be another cold match.
So the one non-Articuno team, just one ice type on Taran Birdee's side. Taran Birdee, and a phenomenal player. I love casting Taran Birdee matches. I love seeing the kinds of teams he chooses to bring. Most recently, had a top 4 at the European International Championships in 2025. Has a World's top 32 from 2024. Was a part of the World Cup champion team in the UK from a couple of years back, and is the regional champion of the 2023 Perth Regionals. Bringing a really powerful physical attacking team with that Chen Pao Urshifu combo. Interestingly, going to be a life orb option on that Urshifu, so not just a Mystic Water, really wanting a ton of damage on those surging strikes and prioritizing damage over survivability on that Pokemon. We're going to see a Gholdengo and a Moongus, a Landorus, and a Tornadus sort of rounding out that team, but a choice band on the Landorus. This is not the Landorus incarnate form, it's the Therian form that we so rarely see in a lot of these more recent regulations.
Yeah, Landorus Incarnate has been the most common ground type special attacker, of course, besides the Ursaluna Blood Moons. But on the physical side, people have been mainly using the Hisuian Ursaluna that we just saw in the previous match. But Landorus Therian here making an appearance. I believe I haven't seen it a lot after regulation, I believe E. I think that was the last format that Landorus Therian was actually popular, but it still does what it wants to do. It provides Intimidate, but it also can provide really strong physical moves next to a Chen Pao. And this Landorus has Choice Band, so those Earthquakes are definitely going to hurt. Something important to notice also is that Urshifu, as you mentioned, is Life Orb, but it doesn't have an offensive Terra. Instead, opting for a defensive Terra Poison option on his set, basically trying to keep it safe from fairy moves, from grass moves. It will still basically overlap the psychic weakness, but there are not a lot of psychic types in the format that are mainly probably on Size Spam teams, but against those probably you don't bring Urshifu or just try to ensure that it's positioned correctly. But Terra Poison, a really nice defensive Terra on Urshifu, and another Tornadus. As I said, Tornadus in one of the matches I cast a couple of rounds ago, it was a really important offensive piece. This one, on the other hand, is not Sash, it's a Rocky Helmet variant, so probably trained a little bit more defensively to be able to survive a little bit longer, but it still has the Protect to keep it alive for a couple of turns and maybe find more opportunities to set up the Tailwind in other turns. We're gonna jump now into the other team sheet. We're gonna go over Kwok Pui-Yin's team, which has the Pokemon that we just saw in the previous match, that Articuno. Articuno having the Choice Spec set with full Ice type moves. Blizzard, Ice Beam, Freeze Ray, and Sheer Cold. Sheer Cold being an Ice type move that doesn't get the benefit of, you know, increasing its power with the Choice specs, but it's still a move that can be like, you know, that type of like get out of jail kind of like you know, option that you can have against Pokemon that you know Articuno cannot do much otherwise. But Blizzard, we just saw it's a broken move, 10% chance of freezing that sometimes feels like 50%. And then I believe it's the same team. Everything else looks the same. Ogre Pond, Raging Bull, a Ninetales with Helping Hand like Clay, Landers, and that Hisuian Arcanine with the Choice Band. We see a little bit of Kwok Pui-Yin's accomplishments. He's been a competitor in the Hong Kong region with a top 8 in 2018 and top 4 also in the 2017, regional champion also in 2017, and 4 times World Cup competitor.
Yeah, so one quick fact to toss out, because I think it will be very crucial for the matchup. Pui-Yin using the same team as we saw last time for Paquet, but interestingly going to have to deal with a bit of a weather war here. The Tornadus on Taran's side does have Rain Dance, and that makes those options a little bit less safe to go for. You really don't want to be stuck locked into Blizzard outside of the snow, and so it's going to be interesting to see how both players choose to approach the weather war aspect of this. But we do have the game ready, so we can jump straight in, and we'll have to see what both players have decided to lead, what strategies they're going to rely on as we go into this match.
Yes, we see Ogrepot and Landers being the duo for Pui-Yin, and we see Landers, Therian on the other side for Taran next to a Tornadus. So a really interesting lead. I think it's very important what you said. Rain Dance can be a nice way to ensure that Articuno does not get this those fully accurate blizzards, but also that it doesn't have this no cloak ability to maybe potentially dodge attacks. But there's no Arcuno yet on the field. Instead, we see the Landers, which is Choice Band, but is facing his brother, the Landers incarnate form, which usually doesn't have to worry about obviously any other Landers because it cannot be touched by ground types. But this Landers does have Rock Slide. However, U-turn seems like a good option because you don't want to take an Ivy Kocho, super effective Ivy Kocho from that Ogerpon.
So we're going to see a Spiky Shield from that Ogerpon, maybe worrying about something like the U-turn being super effective into it, and Landers is just going to go for a Sledge Bomb, getting some nice damage off on that Tornadus. Tornadus is going to retaliate with a Bleak Wind Storm, would have done a ton of damage into the Ogerpon if it hadn't protected, is instead just going to do some nice 30 or so percent to that Landorus, and Landorus on Taran's side is going to Rock Slide, trying to attack that rival Landorus on the other side of the field and bringing it quite low. I think a Tailwind plus Rock Slide might just finish off that Landorus Incarnate now.
Yeah, the good old days of Rock Slide spam are back, guys. We have Choice Band Rock Slide on your screen and doing a pretty decent amount of damage to that Landorus. As you pointed out, this is a probably safe Tailwind Rock Slide, but you still have to worry about Ivy Cudgel. Despite the Intimidate drop, there is a chance the Ivy Cudgel might still KO. Of course, we know the Ivy Cudgel is a high crit chance move, and Ogerpon can always Terrasalize to ensure that it gets that extra damage. And we're gonna see Raging Bull switching in, and I was mentioning the Terrasalization option is possible for Pui-Yin, and we do see the Ogerpon going for that Terra Water to not only get rid of the Grass type, which is not weak to a potential Bleak Wind Storm, but getting that extra powerful Ivy Cudgel to ensure potentially that even with the -1 attack draw from a previous Intimidate, this Ivy Cudgel might go for a KO into that Landers. But you have to move first because Rock Slide is Rock Slide. We see the Choice Band Rock Slide doing a lot here. And there's a flinch.
Wow, really bringing this back to the good old days of VGC when Choice Landers would just toss out Rock Slides all the time. A really nice way to cover a ton of pressure on the Landorus slot, forcing a switch, and still take that Ogerpon's probability of attacking down to, what, 73%. Taran did a great job, I think, there, of just positioning this lead really well. If Pui-Yin had been able to get off that Ivy Cudgel, that might have just KO'd the Landorus, though, so a huge setback there, and I'm sure Taran's pretty happy to be in a position now where there's yet more opportunities for this Landorus to come back later from the Rock Slides, but it's going to be pivoting out for now into a Goldenga.
Yeah, that Landers honestly was in front of an Ogerpon for 2 turns, and I understand the play that Pui-Yin went for in the first turn, trying to scout for a potential U-turn. His Choice Band U-turn would have done a lot of damage, but instead decided to lock into Rock Slide, and Rock Slide is a broken move for a reason. We see a Protect on Taran's Tornadoes, trying to not take any damage from this combination of Pokemon, and an Ivy Cudgel that was intended to hit the Landers that just switch out, and Goldengo taking around 45%, recovering some health with the leftovers, and I believe we saw an Electro Web attempt from that Raging Bull that just missed on the incoming Goldengo.
Yeah, the miss is pretty tough, I think, because otherwise maybe Pui-Yin has an option to just go for another Ivy Cudgel and another Electro Web to be able to take out this Goldengo, but now it's a little bit trickier, and this Goldengo definitely has the potential to snowball if it's able to get too many more free turns. I think the Ogerpon's still pretty well positioned in this situation, though. That special defense boost is really nice, and it's threatening a ton of damage into any target with the Ivy Cudgel.
Yeah, Ivy Cudgel doing a lot of damage, but because it's -1 due to that first turn Intimidate, it's not doing probably what Pui-Yin wants to. And this Goldengo with the leftovers are usually trained a little bit more bulkier to survive for longer. This, you know, despite the option that a lot of the times you want to have on it, maybe a Metal Coat or Life Orb, a lot of Goldengos in this regulation opt for that extra defensive option with the leftovers, and potentially sometimes even that Terra into Fairy, which I believe is not the case in this one because this one is Terra Dragon. But we see Landers coming back to get another Intimidate, another round of Intimidate into that Ogerpon that is going to be vulnerable to this Shadow Ball, but that special defense boost from the Terrasalization is paying off. Another Ivy Cudgel into this Goldengo, not quite enough to pick up the KO, and we see a double up with Draco Meteor trying to potentially pin that slot because, as I mentioned, this Goldengo is Terra Dragon, so despite the resistance to Draco Meteor with the Steel typing, it was not enough to survive the combination after what the Ivy Cudgel did. This Raging Bull is now sitting at a -2 special attack, so it's really not doing any damage, and Landers managed to come back now with the option to lock into a different move and not Rock Slide. But we know that the other Landers in the back could be a great switch into an Earthquake, for example.
Yeah, so a really tough situation, I think, for Pui-Yin. The Raging Bolt is at -2 special attack, and the Ogre Pawn is at -2 attack. So just not a ton of pressure from that side of the field, though some good switches, as you mentioned, with the Landorus Incarnate. This is also, I believe, the last turn of Tailwind, so Taran really positioning this Tornadus in at a good time. It's not under a ton of pressure right now, so it might be able to set up a second Tailwind. We see Pui-Yin going pretty defensively here, wanting to preserve the Ogre Pawn for another turn, but Taran is happy. Oh, and Taran setting up a Rain Dance, maybe anticipating a Ninetales pivoting in. Instead isn't going to have much of an effect, but at least stops it from taking a Thunderclap from the Raging Bolt. As Landorus gets off a super effective Earthquake into this Raging Bolt, that's going to be a ton of damage with the Choice Band and no Intimidates down on this Pokemon.
Yeah, I like this play a lot because despite the -2 special attack for Raging Bolt, your Tornadus is not super healthy, and there's always the option that maybe a critical hit Thunderclap can KO it. So going for that status move ensures that you are not vulnerable to the Thunderclap because you're not using a damaging move into the opponent, and is also going to be able to get weather control in case there was a 9th position, as you point out. But instead, we see the final Pokemon reveal for Pui-Yin is an Arcanine. Getting to Intimidate, but Arcanine is not going to enjoy, even a -1, it's not going to enjoy a Choice Band Earthquake. So I think in this position, you can just go for Tailwind. I believe we just saw confirmation that it was the last turn of Tailwind, so you kind of have to reset it. And despite being a -1, it's still a Choice Band Landers, and this Ogre Pawn is not a Grass type anymore, so you have a pretty free Tailwind Earthquake here. And with the Rain Dance, you can also at some point, if you want to catch that Lander switch, you can go for fully accurate Liquid Storms now in case you want to cover for that. But of course, you want to make sure that your Landers is protected from attacks against the Ogre Punch, so you do want to make sure that the Tailwind is set up so your Landers can outspeed and get that powerful Earthquake.
Just Taran is able to make so much out of the survival earlier of the Landorus, and getting that early flinch on the Ogre Pawn means that it's around now at full health to just fire off Choice Band and Earthquakes. Pui-Yin's able to switch out one Pokemon to be able to be immune to Earthquake, but Extreme Speed not KOing that Tornadus means that now there's Tailwind all set up for Landorus, and it's definitely going to get a KO with a 4-time super effective Earthquake into this Arcanine. And now the Tailwind's set up, it's going to be able to take out this Ogre Pawn on the next turn as well, I believe.
Yeah, I understand what Pui-Yin was doing there. Was trying to potentially get that KO with a Choice Band Extreme Speed into the Tornadus, but Tornadus proven to be very bulky because it survived from around 50%. And now Taran has positioned himself in the perfect way so he can spam spread attacks. You have a fully accurate Bleakwind Storm that it's definitely going to KO a 20% health Landorus, and Earthquake should just KO the Ogre Pawn. But even if it doesn't somehow, Ogre Pawn survives, you still have to take that Bleakwind Storm that is definitely going to make sure that you win the game. And really great performance by Taran, ensuring that Landers and Tornadoes are together to spam those spread attacks, Choice Band Earthquake, and the Bleakwind Storms in the rain fully accurate. But I wonder what would have happened if that Rock Slide flinch just never happened, right? Because we saw that the Pui-Yin went for a Terastallization with his Ogre Pawn that turn, so that obviously means that he was trying to go for an offensive move, potentially an Ivy Cudgel into the Landers, and I'm not sure if Landers can survive that. I'm pretty sure Landers, obviously being just naturally a tanky Pokemon, might have a chance with the -1. It's still Terastallization, of course, is boosting that Ivy Cudgel even more, but I wonder if that play would have changed the game. But I'm pretty sure Taran at that point considered that maybe his Landers had enough bulk to survive a -1 Terra Water Ivy Cudgel.
Yeah, I think that's actually really crucial, that Pui-Yin isn't going to be able to have confirmed that Ivy Cudgel would KO. Like, knowing that role is so important for planning out the rest of the game, because I think from what we know this game, Pui-Yin's strategy seems like it might just be go for exactly the same thing and don't flinch, because as soon as that Landorus is gone, suddenly that Arcanine Hisui, which was in the back, has so much more that's able to do against Taran's team. But because of that flinch, or if that Landorus had been able to survive without needing the flinch, that suddenly totally changes the game, because Landorus is comfortable, it doesn't have to worry about extreme speed KOs or anything, and can just threaten so much damage. One of Rock Slide or Earthquake does so much damage to just about everything on Pui-Yin's team.
Yeah, and I wonder also what would have happened that turn 1 if, you know, the Ogre Pawn, instead of going for the Spiky Shield, trying to scout for a potential U-turn, Choice Band U-turn. I don't expect that would have been enough to KO a full HP Ogre Pawn, but its Choice Band is super effective hit. it probably should have done at least more than 50% despite not being stabbed. So I understand that play, trying to scout for it, but then Rock Slide is one of the most broken moves ever created in BGC because of that 30% chance of flinching and your opponent's not doing anything. So let's see if we can see some adaptations in this game too. I believe we have game 2 ready, so we're gonna jump into it immediately, and we're gonna see if Articuno potentially makes an appearance in this game too, because we didn't see it on game 1. That could be a way you can play around the Landers, right? Landers doesn't want to face ice types, and you have one of the scariest ice types in your team in the Articuno. But so far, we're gonna have to wait a little bit more to see if that Articuno makes an appearance. We do see Ogerpon and Arcanine turn 1 from Pui-Yin, and we see once again Tornadoes and Landers from Taran's side.
I really like this lead from Pui-Yin. It's still a tough matchup to handle the Landorus, but getting the Intimidate off right away goes a long way towards mitigating the damage output of this Landorus. And the Landorus sort of has to choose between going for some powerful ground type attack to take out the Arcanine versus going for a move that can threaten the Ogerpon. So it gives Pui-Yin just a little bit more leeway, knowing that Taran is of course going to try the same lead this second game, and even gives the option for Pui-Yin to just establish the Intimidate and maybe switch out after hopefully baiting a ground type attack.
There's a Lander switching on the Arcanine slot, not wanting to take a 4-time super effective ground move from that Therian form Landers. And instead, we're going to see once again the Terastallization on that Wellspring Ogerpon, not keeping the grass typing because it's facing, of course, that Tornadoes with potential Blink Wind Storm, and also that Landers with potential U-turn that can be a lot of damage into that grass type. Instead, we're not going to see a Blink Wind Storm. We're going to see a Tailwind, and I believe we saw Taran locking into U-turn. This time, not going for Rock Slide, trying to position a little bit more, given the opportunity to something else to come. But if we see a Terastallization on Ogerpon, I'm pretty sure that's going to be an Ivy Cudgel into one of these 2 Pokemon. As we see Urshifu being one of the adaptations that Taran made in this game, bringing that life from Urshifu. Ivy Cudgel is not technically going to do a lot of damage, or shouldn't, into this water type Urshifu, doing apparently around 20% because of their resistance and the -1. So Urshifu now has been brought in front of an Ogerpon that does not have water absorbed anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you can see what Pui-Yin was going for. If that Landorus had gone for a ground type attack instead, then that would have been such a huge benefit for Pui-Yin's side. But instead, Taran just gets so much out of just a simple, like, Tailwind U-turn. The Intimidate is down on this Ogerpon, the Terastallization is burned from Pui-Yin, and the Urshifu took almost no damage on the switch-in. And now there's 3 whole turns of Tailwind for Taran to be able to do a ton of damage to just about any slot. We're going to see the Ogerpon try to reset its attack stat and get that Raging Bolt in. That's going to be crucial for handling the Urshifu. But even with this Landorus switching out, the Arcanine Hisui that has to come in here is not going to enjoy taking a Surging Strike if that's the targeting that Taran went for.
Yeah, I'm really surprised to see Arcanine once again. Like, Arcanine is a Pokemon that has a really, like, interesting typing, of course, Rock and Fire, but it's 4 times weak to ground, and it's also 4 times weak to water. So it's a really interesting Pokemon to bring in this matchup, but Pui-Yin has decided to bring it maybe as a way to respond to potential Blink Wind Storms, or just have Intimidate to maybe allow his Pokemon to also survive for longer. We didn't see a Surging Strikes into the Lander slot. Instead, we saw a close combat that went into the Raging Bolt switch in, and now Arcanine at least has the option to potentially go for an Extreme Speed, maybe even a Terastallization. I believe it's Terra Water Arcanine, so it can at least survive one of these attacks. And Raging Bolt can obviously go for a Thunderclap here, pressuring the Urshifu, but it's not the best spot for Taran despite having the speed advantage, because now it's facing 2 Pokemon that have priority moves. Thunderclap obviously is a priority move that can immediately one-shot the Urshifu in this case, unless you want to go for a Terastallization, but you can play around with a Protect or Switch, and that's exactly what we're going to see. We're going to see a Protect in the Urshifu, and Tornado switching out for this Landers Incarnate that honestly has been a crucial Pokemon in this match, despite facing a team with 2 Ice types that so far Pui-Yin hasn't brought.
Yeah, Landorus there has been the MVP of this matchup. Urshifu just going for a conservative Protect here. Arcanine risking the powerful Water type attack and just going for a powerful Twitch and Rock Slide here. Isn't punished this turn, is able to stick around, and we're going to see the Raging Bolt go for an Electro Web. No damage because it's going to hit into the immunity on the Landorus Therian and into the Protect on the Urshifu Rapid Strike. One thing that's really important here, though, is this Urshifu continues to pressure some really powerful Water-type attacks if it wanted to into the Arcanine, even though it looks like Taran's maybe considering some more conservative plays.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, I think Lander is making like such a great impact in this match was something that I was not anticipating from Team Preview. It's at the end of the day a team that has two ice types, and Lander is a Pokemon with a typing that is 4 times weak to ice moves, and Pugin hasn't brought any of those two ice types. I believe because of what you said earlier, right? Like there's a Tornadoes with Rain Dance that, despite not being used yet in this match, it's still a move that you know can immediately change the way your two ice types play. So that is the team sheet pressure on that Tornadoes with Rain Dance, forcing Pugin to not bring the ice type moves, and as a result, Lander is getting a lot of advantage here with the very powerful Choice Band boosted moves. And another thing that is worth mentioning is that Articuno, despite being great on paper into Landers, is 4 times weak to Rock Slide if that Landers chooses to go for it. We see an a Thunderclap attempt into a Was It Urshifu, but Taran making a great play of just bringing the Tornado so you can Earthquake next to it, and that is a KO for the Raging Bull.
Yeah, that was a really nice play from Taran because I think Tailwind is going down this turn, and so getting Tornadus back onto the field is incredibly useful. The Earthquake was starting to KO on both Pokemon. Terastallization was already burned from Puggin's side, so Taran had just set up pretty much a perfect turn. The Raging Bolt went for the one thing that it could go for, which was trying to catch the Urshifu in some sort of attack other than Aqua Jet, maybe try to go for a KO, but unfortunately it doesn't work out for Pui-Yin because Taran had this just gorgeous play of the Earthquake and switch in. Can now reset Tailwind if you would like, keep going for Earthquakes to get a little bit of damage, or pivot the Landorus back out too. There's just a ton of options here. Taran's got to take a moment to reestablish Tailwind, but after that it's going to have just so much pressure for the rest of the game with that Raging Bolt gone.
Yeah, Tailwind is really safe now from Taran's side. You are probably going to trade Landers to that Ivy Concho from Ogerpon for a lot of damage into that Ogerpon. It's a Choice Band Earthquake. This Wellspring Ogerpon is not grass type anymore, so this should do around 50% at least. Probably even more. Yeah, I said 50%. It's doing around 70. But as I said, you're gonna trade that, but you are probably fine with that if you're Taran because Landers has done an amazing job in this set. It's okay. It can go down back to its Pokeball with that Ivy Cudgel, and probably, oh, we see a substitute. That is probably one of the few options that Pugin had to at least have a chance of getting something in this game, because you don't want to face a live for Urshifu and Tailwind, right? Especially if your Ogerpon has Terrasilize, so it's not a water absorb variant anymore. And despite the substitute, of course, there is obviously the option for Surgeon Strikes to just KO Landers through substitute, because the first hit would usually just break the sub and then it will go down from the other two. But Ogerpon is still there to protect its partner Landers from an attack. But at this point, you just click Bleakwind Storm and probably protect from Urshifu if you want to scout that, or just immediately go for the damage. We saw confirmation on Taran's last Pokemon being Chien-Pao, just waiting in the back with the Fukusash. So I don't see a lot of ways Pugin can maybe try to bring this back, but at least with the substitute, he has a chance, with the Mind Games, and potentially even Bleakwind Storm misses.
Every Pokemon on Pui-Yin's side now is in range of a Surging Strike's KO, and there's just not very much damage being able to come out to you. Taran does have to play a little careful here, as you mentioned, because there is a lot of damage potential from the Ogerpon. Ogerpon is also going to protect itself, so maybe something pretty close to a dead turn here, as Landorus also goes for protect. Pui-Yin just trying to stall out a little bit of the Tailwind, because getting rid of that is going to be crucial for later in the game.
That is something you don't see every day. You're protecting both of your Pokemon in front of an Onsen Fizz Urshifu that you know hits for protect. So this player is definitely aware of what he's doing. It's not a coincidence. It's not that he forgot. He is protecting because he knows that Urshifu probably wanted to protect, so Tornadoes can get maybe a Bleakwind Storm to break the sub or just get rid of the Ogerpon. So amazing play, protecting in front of an Urshifu, but Taran obviously trying to scout for something, getting that protect. Tornadoes did get the Rain Dance off. Now those Bleakwind Storms are going to be fully accurate, and also the Urshifu is going to do even more damage. But Urshifu, despite being bulky apparently based on the HP number we saw on screen, shouldn't survive under power from a Sheer Force Lander, so especially not from full HP. Bleakwind Storm now is guaranteed to connect because of that Rain Dance on the previous turn, but Landers with the sub is able to survive for at least one extra turn, and I suppose we're going to see an Earth Power into the Urshifu that is not going to be able to survive, even though it's not super effective. Sheer Force Landers just being such a powerful Pokemon, and Pugin doesn't know still the last Pokemon we do know is Chien-Pao is going to be revealed now. Sash Chimpao, one of the best Pokemon you can have in this endgame, but I believe we still have an Arcanine alive, and Arcanine would definitely enjoy not having to face an Urshifu anymore.
Yeah, Arcanine is actually really well set up here. I don't know if it's enough to get through because the Chimpao still has its Focus Sash intact. It's got an option for a Stellar Terra and Sacred Sword, so likely still in Taran's favor. But I really like the way that Pui-Yin's been playing this last few turns, not knowing the last Pokemon on Taran's side. If it had been something like the Amoonguss or the Goldengo, then Pui-Yin has been playing pretty much flawlessly to be able to bring this endgame close. There's still maybe a few options from Pui-Yin's side, but got to be really tough. That Landorus has lost its substitute now, and so it's pretty close to KO range from a lot of attacks. I don't know. It's a pretty tight endgame. What are you thinking about here, Paul?
Yeah, we saw the Stellar option, the Stellar Terrestrialization on Taran's side. He's just going all into this Arcanine because this Chimpao does have a way to pressure the Arcanine because of its rock typing. It has Sacred Sword with the Stellar Terra boost. It's going to be probably not enough to KO because of the -1 from the previous Intimidate. But this Arcanine has a Rock Slide that is going to hit both of this Pokemon on Taran's side super effectively. And let's see if it's enough to KO with the combination of Bleak Wind Storm. It is enough. I don't know if that's a critical hit. No, it's just the raw power of Chimpao with a Sword of Ruin ability. Despite the -1 from Intimidate, Chimpao being so powerful with that extra boost from the Terra Stellar option and a critical hit from Bleak Wind Storm. I don't believe that mattered because at that point the game was probably over, but I think Pui-Yin at that point was just hoping that the Arcanine survives and can get a Rock Slide to KO potentially the Tornadoes with the extra help from Chimpao's Sword of Ruin, and then see if, you know, Chimpao was guaranteed to survive with the Focus Sash, but then see if you can force maybe a 2v1 with your Landers and your low HP Arcanine perhaps into the Chimpao. But Sacred Sword saving the Terra Stellar for that endgame on Chimpao was crucial, because without the Terra Stellar, I don't think that Sacred Sword would have been enough because of the -1 from the previous Intimidate. But great game. We saw Taran playing very, very carefully with that Landers. Just a masterpiece on how to use a Pokemon in a matchup with two Ice types. Not only one, but two Ice types. And you brought your Landers, and he managed to position it perfectly in almost every game next to Tornadoes. You can spam Choice Band Earthquakes, or just like the Rock Slide pressure we saw in game 1. So who would have thought? Landers Therian making an appearance in Rec F and having such a great match here.
Yeah, I really like that team choice from Taran for so many reasons, but especially because Regulation F is a deep enough format that there's so many strong strategies that aren't at the top of players' minds, but that still can really align with a specific player's playstyle. We've seen Taran run so many really powerful Tailwind attacker kinds of teams, and I think that Landorus Therian was a really interesting way to leverage that. It led to so many cool board states that I think players wouldn't necessarily be prepared for from just Regulation F 1.0, the earlier version of this regulation that ran out. And I think also just like so many little technical decisions led to so much benefit. Even just that little bit of U-turn chip that Taran got at the very start of the game on the Arcanine, that might have been the difference between Stellar Sacred Sword getting the KO or not. So just impeccably well managed from Taran, showing us why he's one of the best players in the game right now. I loved seeing that match.
Yeah, definitely. The Arcanine potentially maybe in range of surviving that Stellar Terra, but the U-turn chip damage, as you mentioned, was probably needed, so this Arcanine was later in range of other moves. But Landorus Incarnate being a Pokemon that I believe hasn't seen that much usage lately because of its brother Landorus Incarnate. Sorry, I said Incarnate. The Therian form hasn't been seeing that much usage anymore. But I believe Taran, if my mind is correct and if I'm not mistaken, did use a Choice Band Landorus team back in potentially maybe Regulation D. It was the Worlds format in 2023. I believe it was at a time a concept that Taran has already explored, and if that's the case, I'm really happy to see him translating that now into Rec F2 with the Choice Band Landers, something that not a lot of people is prepared for. Of course, you are usually, when you think about ground types in this format, you think about Ursaluna, you think about Landers Incarnate, you don't really think about Choice Band Earthquake spam anymore, but we just saw, of course, on stream that it is still really strong, so you have to be prepared for that. And if you are prepared for that, but keep in mind, Landers can also go for Rock Slides, and Rock Slide is one of the best moves historically in VGC. So I'm happy to see a Landers Therian winning against a team with Articuno and Ninetales, and that's it. So congratulations to Taran. I believe we have a break ready, so we're gonna jump into a small break, guys. Don't go anywhere. We're gonna come back with more action.